Welcome to the Arrive U.S. Immigration Law podcast with your hosts Jeremy Richards and Christine Jerusik. Join us as we navigate the complex world of U.S. immigration law with a special focus on opportunities and challenges for Canadians and Mexicans under the USMCA. Whether you're a professional, business owner, or family member seeking to work and live in the United States, we're here to guide you every step of the way. So sit back and relax. You have arrived.
Welcome back to another episode of the Arrive podcast, the U.S. Immigration Law podcast for Canadians. Today, we have an interesting discussion. There is a lot going on in the United States politically right now, immigration-wise, and I guess taking the temperature of Canadians based on our experience with Canadians that we're speaking to that are coming to the U.S., there's a lot of concern out there. There's a lot of concern with what is going on in the United States, how that might impact Canadians as visitors, as business professionals, and what should they expect coming into the United States. Well, hopefully we can put you at ease. Canadians, we love you. You're welcome. Come visit, do business. And I think a lot of the media out there is portraying it as some sort of an apocalypse down here in the United States with immigration and Canadians. Well, it's not. As long as you're coming to the United States illegally, then you're not going to have anything to worry about. The enforcement that you're seeing across the United States by ICE or Immigration and Customs Enforcement is for violators of the law. And most of them are criminals that have committed criminal acts on top of immigration violations. So they've committed immigration violations and criminal violations on top of it. So if you're coming to the United States, you're coming legally, you're not committing crimes, you're coming to go to a concert, you're coming to work or do business or visit family members, go to the beach, whatever it is, feel free to continue to come to the United States. You should not be worried about coming to the United States. There is nothing to be concerned about from that front. Now, will you face additional scrutiny potentially at the border? Yes, expect that. When you are being inspected by the border officer, they expect them to ask a few more questions. Expect them to dig into what you're doing in the United States a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you're driving, you may even experience kind of an exit interview from the CBSA, the Canadian border officials, as you're coming across the bridge. Personally, myself, I was recently inspected entering the United States from Canada after a short trip. And it was a very pleasant experience. They stopped me. They asked me a couple questions, wanted to know how long I'd been out of the United States. And they wanted to know what I was bringing into the United States with me, whether I had any alcohol, tobacco, firearms, things of that nature. And they did a quick inspection of my goods in my car, and I was quickly on my way. But I think even Canada has stepped up enforcement of people entering the United States, I think, to comply with, some of these threats and things like that have been happening. They've stepped up enforcement too. So you can expect a little bit of a longer wait time at the border. But it was nothing crazy. It was everything was pleasant and there was no problems.
And this is, just to clarify, this is CBSA inspecting prior to CBP inspecting.
Right. So that's the Canadian immigration authorities inspecting Canadians leaving Canada and entering the United States before you get on the bridge. So that is happening. Just as long as you're aware of it, you can build that into your travel schedule. It shouldn't impact you at all.
And this is exactly what we expected, that there would be increased scrutiny. That's what Trump promised in his campaign and his Protect America executive orders and all of those. I can't name them all. There's been hundreds of them, I think, at this point. But that they're going to increase enforcement. They're going to have more stringent, interviews and make sure that the vetting procedures and everything are increased for people coming to the U.S.
Yeah, and this isn't unusual. We often see this happening on the U.S. side. I rarely see it happening on the Canadian side prior to present history, but the U.S. side, they do this all the time. If they're looking for a fugitive or they think somebody, they're looking for somebody in particular. I've been stopped several times crossing into Canada before I hit the Canadian, port. I'm stopped before I get on the bridge and asked a few questions by the U.S. authorities, kind of an exit interview from the U.S. So, just be prepared for that kind of heightened scrutiny. and it shouldn't be a problem as long as you're aware and build it into your travel schedule.
Yep, exactly. So as long as you're coming legally, you're doing everything above board, then you don't have anything to worry about. And recently, since the Trump administration has taken over, since these new policies have been put into place, we have still got people approved for TN visas and L1 visas and E visas and green cards and plenty of visitors. So you are still welcome to the United States. Visas are still being issued. None of these programs have substantively changed, if I can say the word. They're all the same. They haven't made a change to it. Again, scrutiny would be the only thing that has changed. They're just putting a magnifying glass on it now, a little bit more closely than they would have in the past. But if you're qualified, you have nothing to worry about. If you're doing everything you should be doing, you have nothing to worry about.
Yep,
so
just make sure everything's in order before before you get there, before you send in your application, and you should be fine.
And if you have any questions about it, we can help. That's what we're here for. So if you do have concerns about your documentation, if you do have concerns about coming to the United States for some reason, well, then you might want to speak to an immigration lawyer who can help put you at ease and help reassure you that you have everything that you need to. So if there is a time where you need to make sure your documents are double checked and everything, is looked over very closely, it's now, because that's what they're doing on their end too. There's also something that's come out that is, and I think people are a little bit concerned about. It's called the alien registration requirement. And this is an old rule that was already in what is called the Immigration and Nationality Act. It's already written in there. The Trump administration, however, has decided that they're going to enforce it. And by enforce it, what does that mean? Well, if you don't comply with this alien registration requirement, it's a misdemeanor. There are financial penalties as well as immigration penalties if you don't comply. How are they going to enforce it? And what does that look like? Well, we don't know yet. All we've been told is that anybody coming to the United States who is going to be here longer than 30 days, who was not fingerprinted or issued an I-94 record of admission upon entry to the United States, must then register through USCIS.gov, through the USCIS website, and complete an alien registration. And then you'll receive a receipt confirming that you've been registered, and then you're supposed to carry this registration receipt with you if you're 18 years of age or older as proof that you registered. Who does this apply to?
Right. What average Canadian traveler is this going to apply to?
One of them, so we call them non-controlled Canadians, right? The ones that drive across the border and for some reason or another, the border officer did not issue an I-94.
Right. They're not doing their job.
Yeah.
They didn't hit the entry button for you.
Yeah.
So they did the information didn't get entered in the system. And sometimes we see where they've recorded the entry. The entry's been recorded, but the I-94 just wasn't issued. If that's you, if you enter the United States and your I-94 is blank and does not show your entry, then you're planning to stay for 30 days or more, then you need to register. That's who it applies to. Now, what percentage of people is that entering the U.S.? It's like
less. I don't even want to
I
give
would
it a
say it's
percent.
like less than 10% of people. So
we run into them all the time because Canadians are the ones that often just I call it a smile and wave, but they just let you right through, right? Yeah. Oh, you're just coming down for the day to go shopping. All right, come on in. And
standard questions. Where are you going? How long are you planning to stay? What is the purpose of your trip? And you're on your way a lot of times. Bringing anything in with you? No. Okay, have a nice time. Have a nice time at the outlet mall, right?
Yep.
And then.
And you weren't properly admitted, therefore there's no record of your admission.
And if that's what you're doing, and you're coming for the day, you're coming for a week to go to Disney,
have to worry about it.
Or Florida or whatever, you're coming for March break. First of all, this doesn't kick in until after March break for Ontario residents.
Yeah, this was announced February 25th, so 30 days from then would be March 25th.
Yeah, and March break
or March 24th.
I think it's March 10th to 14th, or 10th, that would be really short, but it's around the middle of March, so you should be fine. But it's for people that are coming, like our snowbirds next winter.
Yeah.
If you're coming in the fall, you're planning to stay for 6 months, 3 months, that's you, right? You need to check your I-94 when you come in.
Or if you're in a relationship with a U.S. citizen, and we see that a lot, and they come down and they'll spend a month or two with their significant
Right, if you
other
have
and go back to
family here in
Canada
the
or
US,
whatever it is.
yeah.
Make sure. So how do you verify? That's important too.
Well,
so
what is an I-94? Maybe there's people listening that don't even know what that is.
So I-94 is your official record of admission from CBP, or Customs and Border Protection. When you're inspected and admitted to the United States, the I-94 documents the day that you were inspected. It also indicates the status that they admitted you to the United States under, and it also indicates how long you're authorized to stay. And that's electronic now, and that's where a lot of times you don't even know you're getting one because it's an electronic document. They've turned it over electronically. Sometimes they'll stamp you in your passport, and then it's obvious they did. A lot of times they don't, though. Majority of the times it's electronic. So you have to go to CBP's website, and if you Google I-94, CBP I-94 lookup, and we'll also
have it right here. It's I-94.cbp.dhs.gov.
Then you go to that website, and it'll ask for your passport biographic information. And not only can you retrieve your I-94 record of admission, you can also retrieve your travel history. It'll show your current travel history under there too, and when they documented your exits and entries to the United States.
And that's how they're going to know if you don't register and you leave the United States. Say you came in the end of March, you were not issued an I-94, you never checked. You stayed for a couple months, went back to Canada, and then you tried to come back a few months later. You're like, oh, I'm going to go, go to the outlet mall, whatever. They could stop you and say, hey, it looks like
they could refuse you.
You were here longer than 30 days, and you did not register. We're aware of all of that. So they are keeping track of it. And if you enter your passport information on this website we just gave you, you're going to be able to pull up your last I-94. So the last one for the last time you came to the United States. Maybe you're not here now. That one's no longer valid if you've left the United States, or maybe you are here. You want to pull that up and make sure that you have one issued to you. If you're planning to stay longer than 30 days after March 25th, you're going to need to register.
And this applies, and so you understand who this applies to, it's longer than 30 days. Basically, you were undocumented when you entered is what this means, right? They didn't give you proper documentation. So make sure you look it up on CBP's website. If you're flying, they usually admit you on an I-94 almost every time.
I
don't
wouldn't
see
say
people
undocumented,
fly.
I'd say uninspected, right? So there's no record of your inspection.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, inspected, but because you were inspected
right
when you came in.
But Canadians don't get documents, so there's no visa.
Yeah, there's no visa. Well, the I-94 is the document that they should have issued, but it's electronic.
Yeah.
So, and the only way you can find that is on CBP's website. So make sure you verify. And that's the point here is this is something that's been announced. We don't know how it's going to be enforced. But they also indicated with this announcement that it is a top priority, which seems crazy, that this alien registration requirement is a DHS priority to make sure people are registered. So to me, that would indicate that if you don't do it, they're not going to take it lightly. So be safe. If you're going to be here over 30 days, check your passport. Make sure you got 994. If you didn't, comply with it. And then, like Christine said, if you do stay over 30 days, you were required to register. You go back to Canada and you're just trying to come back as a visitor or whatever it might be, and they see you failed to register, they could use that as a reason to refuse your entry to the United States because you failed to comply with an immigration requirement. So if they are serious about it, and again, we don't know.
Yeah, we could see that.
We don't want to scare anybody here. We're just talking about the situation and what they're announcing. They could use it to refuse your entry. It would be kind of petty, in my opinion. Right. I mean, because you're authorized to stay as a Canadian up to 6 months. And I don't know. I think it's going to come down to the border officer and whether or not they like you or not in that situation, right? Like we often see. But it is announced as a requirement. Be aware of it and make sure you comply with it.
It's really easy to check your I-94 every time you come in. You can do it on your phone the minute you cross the border, and you should see the information pop up pretty readily. Save a screenshot of your I-94, and then you're good. And if you see that it wasn't issued or it's an old one from a former travel, check back in a few hours. Maybe it didn't update. If it never updates and it doesn't record your entry and you're going to stay longer than 30 days, just make sure you log in and to the new registration system when it's operable.
And
do that.
When it's operable is important because we've already tried to go in and do these registrations. It's not available yet,
Right.
Because the 30 days hasn't hit. So that's yet to be seen of how that's going to work. And we'll have another discussion when it is up and live to talk about what it does look like.
And we should be clear here. The whole scenario and the whole requirement isn't aimed at targeting Canadians that are coming in as visitors. That's not the purpose of this enforcement. It isn't. But we're just hypothesizing on how the change in enforcement could impact our Canadian clients, and
be aware of it.
And we just want people to be aware of the way the rule could, it could be like friendly fire sort of thing. You know what I mean? You're caught up in this, even though you're not the intended target. Really, they're trying to have people self-report that have been here in the United States for years that are entered without inspection.
Bingo.
Right? That's what they're trying to get at. And that's not you, our Canadian friends.
But you're caught up in it.
But you're caught up in it. So we just want you to be aware of how that's going to impact you possibly. Maybe at the 11th hour, they say, hey, Canadians are exempt from this. We don't know.
Yep.
But it could impact you the way it is being spoken about now.
Yeah, I think you just hit it. It's really targeting individuals in the United States who've been here for a long period of time and they have no record of.
Yes.
And what's the likelihood of those individuals registering? Come on.
And
I've
there
been
may
in the
be
US for 10 years.
a few Canadians that are in that position, but I think
that's another discussion. Who here who's overstayed for any length of time or committed a crime or done anything like that is going to register anyway. So this is one of those regulations where you see the law-abiding people getting caught up in this procedural thing.
Yeah, it's like the question.
It impacts the law-abiding more than it does the criminals. So.
Yeah, it's like the question on the I-485. Have you ever committed a crime for which you were never caught?
Yes.
And we never arrested.
Let me disclose that now.
Who is saying yes to that?
The dead body is in my backyard. You got me. Yeah, it's silly, but it's the reality too.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with. The other rule that they said that they're going to enforce and be aware of, and I'm actually speaking this weekend with the refugee community here in the Buffalo area. They are all legal. They came to the United States legally. They are admitted in what's called permanent resident status when they come to the United States. So they have valid reason to be here, and they were already vetted before they came. These individuals are getting pulled over by ICE, and a lot of them are minorities. So you have a lot of discrimination going in this enforcement as well. But they're asking them for proof of their immigration status. A lot of them don't speak English.
Barrier,
yeah, they don't speak English. They don't understand what they're required to do. But there is a regulation along with this alien registration requirement that is now being enforced as well that requires any foreign national in the United States to carry with you at all times proof of your status. So if you are a green card holder, you should have your green card or a copy of your green card on you at all times. If you are a Canadian visitor, well, you should have your passport. If you are a TN visa holder, you should have proof of your TN status. That's what it's saying. So, and that is also a misdemeanor if you don't carry it with you.
Yeah, and you may even if you're concerned about this, and some people are way more risk averse than others, right? It may make sense to print out a copy of your I-94 or screenshot a copy of that and keep it with you while you're here in the U.S. If you're concerned that, you're going to be subject to the immigration enforcement, just have it with you. It doesn't hurt to have a screenshot of that on your phone.
Yeah, and we don't want to give the impression that there are border officers and ICE agents everywhere you look. That's not the case. I don't even know if I've seen one.
I mean, there's nothing
out
of the ordinary here.
We see them because we're next to the border. But it's not like there's these massive raids going on across the United States and everything's in turmoil. No, that's not the case.
Well, there are raids happening in some cities.
They're very targeted,
yes.
though. Very targeted. And then they've always done these raids, right? It's not like these are anything new. When they have reason for suspicion, they're going to investigate a business. They're going to investigate an individual. So they're just making it very public. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that before, of how Trump is very loud and obnoxious, and he's up there with his, megaphone, making sure everybody knows what he's doing. It's just his style. And in the reality of things, the president and our generation that was responsible for more deportations and removals was President Obama. It wasn't even President Trump, but he did it quietly. He did it behind the scenes. So nobody knew about it. Trump's just very loud in the way he does things, and he's making it known. So as a Canadian, there's no cause for concern. You do things legally, you do things the way you're supposed to be doing them, then you're going to be fine. But make sure you do verify your entries when you come to the United States and you're here over 30 days. Be aware of that requirement so that doesn't come back to potentially impact you. And, as far as other immigration news, because this isn't the only thing going on.
Right.
This is H-1B season, right? H-1B lottery is coming up. So for our Canadian friends out there who have a job, and I've spoke to one this morning on the phone, the individual's OPT or their authorization to work after school is expiring, and the position that they are working in does not qualify under a TN occupation. So this person is subject to another visa category, which would be H-1B in most cases. That's the most universal visa for people that want to work in the United States. And this individual is going to need an H-1B in the lottery. So if you are in that situation, you are in a occupation that does not qualify under TN status, you're a manager, an executive, or just in a field that isn't identified as an occupation that qualifies for TN status, this is the time for your employer to then enter you into the H-1B visa lottery. The lottery opens up in March, so it's coming up quickly in about a week. I think March 7th is the lottery opening date, and it is open for 3 weeks. So you do have time to get into that lottery, but we are coming up quickly on the H-1B visa lottery. So who should enter the H-1B visa lottery? Well, again, individuals who maybe are under your OPT or CPT attached to studies in the United States. If you were studying in the United States and you have that temporary employment with your employment authorization document, then and your occupation is not one that would qualify for TN status, you should be asking your employer to enter you into the H-1B visa lottery now. Individuals who maybe you're on a TN and you've been consulting for a company and now they want to hire you on a permanent basis and turn you over into an executive or managerial role, or you've been promoted and you're on a TN and now your position no longer qualifies for TN status. You should be having that conversation now with your employer to enter you into the H-1B visa lottery and hopefully get you a spot in the lottery.
Or if your OPT is ending.
Yep. And you'll get an automatic extension of that OPT if you're selected into the lottery. It's called cap protection, and that's a whole other discussion of how that works. But yeah, if you fall into
students just should, right now, if you're on OPT,
you should be aware, and this is your step to potentially get that work status in the United States. And just so you are aware, as an employer or an employee, the occupations that qualify for an H-1B are what are called specialty occupations. A specialty occupation is defined by U.S. immigration law as an occupation that requires at least a bachelor's degree for entry into the occupation. And if you don't have a bachelor's degree, well, it would be the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, which by definition is at least 12 years of progressive experience in the industry. Those are the types of roles that qualify for an H-1B. If it's a lesser role, it does not qualify. So any occupation that doesn't typically require a bachelor's degree won't qualify for the H-1B visa either. So this is your opportunity to convert over to that H-1B if you're in another status that you'd be transitioning out of, or if you don't qualify for another status and this is your only option to work in the United States, would be under the H-1B visa program. So that is the season that's upon us. So be aware of that. Talk to your employer and get ready for that H-1B visa lottery. And right now it's the registration process. The way the lottery works is you have to have an employer. You can't enter this as an individual. So you have to have a U.S. employer who enters you into the H-1B visa lottery. They will then do a random selection. There's 85,000 potential spots, 65,000 that are available to those with bachelor's degrees, and another 20,000 available to those with U.S. master's degree or higher. So that's where the total of 85,000 comes from. They do a random lottery, and it's what is called beneficiary centric. That means it's not attached to the employer. Ultimately, it's attached to the individual. And that's to prevent fraud. So people can't be entered multiple times into the lottery. And that selection is attached to that individual through the lottery. And if you're lucky to be selected in the lottery, well, that's just the first step. The H-1B visa lottery does not give you a visa like it might seem. It gives you the opportunity to then be petitioned for an H-1B visa is all it means. So, but it is the first step in the process. You have to be selected. Then once you're selected, your employer would then file a petition for you, a visa petition for that H-1B visa. Then once that's approved, then you would ultimately convert over to an H-1B visa and be allowed to work in the U.S. on that H-1B visa. So this is the season to start all of that. So if you find yourself in that situation, you should be having that discussion with your employer so that you can move over to H-1B status through the H-1B visa lottery. And I'm sure there's going to be things to discuss here in the near future as things rapidly change with U.S. immigration. Look forward to our other podcasts coming up where we will continue our discussion on how they are going to implement this alien registration requirement and what to do after you get selected in that H-1B visa lottery. But as always, if you have any questions about U.S. immigration, we're here for you. We deal with Canadians all the time. We gladly deal with Canadians. We love what we do. We love helping Canadians live and work in the U.S. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need advice from an immigration lawyer, we're here to help. Thank you for listening and have a great day.